First episode psychosis is when a young person, typically a young person, experiences psychotic symptoms for the first time at a level of which we say is above threshold. So that means that they have delusions, hallucinations, maybe other disturbances of mood and behaviour. And it's a very frightening and disturbing experience, not just for the person affected, but for those around them. This has been an area which has assumed huge importance in schizophrenia and other areas of research over the last 30 years. It originally developed because of a research focus. People recognised this was the time to really study the illness and to understand how it came about and what was causing it and how best to treat it. But I think what motivated us was, how do we actually improve the evidence-based care of these young people who come into care very disturbed, often frightened and terrified, their families very stressed and in crisis. How can we actually help them achieve the best level of recovery that they can? And that's what's inspired our research over the last 30 years. So the things we've worked on are, what is the right timing and dose of medication, because people were using very excessive doses of medication and using the medications in very inappropriate ways much of the time. And also, how do we actually provide expert and sensitive psychological and social forms of intervention and care to maximise recovery? And 30 years ago, none of those things were worked out. We're in a much better position these days to treat young people and their families in a holistic way and in a way that gives them the best chance of a full recovery with hope and optimism for the future. So our research is totally focused on those issues now, and we also try to understand what underpins the onset of these illnesses, what's happening to the brain, what's happening to the world around the person that's bringing about this illness. Things like cannabis and stress, for example, are triggers for it. And what's the right sequence and duration of treatment that we need to offer? Those are the questions we're looking at in our research, and we've learned a lot over the last 20 years especially. We've got to detect these illnesses at the earliest possible point before damage is done, not just biologically, but also psychologically and socially. And we've got to make sure that we look after people consistently over the period that they're affected by the illness. We don't just patch them up and kick them out again, which is all too often the case in traditional psychiatry. But we stick with them and we try to give them the best chance of a contributing life and a fulfilling and constructive experience. A big thing about this area is that it's transformed the fields of particularly schizophrenia, but other areas of mental health. The early intervention idea has taken root and it's got major momentum now internationally. If you pick up a journal in schizophrenia, at least a third of the journal is devoted to early psychosis care and research. And that wasn't the case going back in the past. There's still a lot more work to do, but we are definitely on the right track, and we are catching up with the other areas of medical research like cancer and heart disease, where these principles have been enshrined for many decades. One of the big things that we emphasise here at Orygen is involving young people and families in everything that we do. And that goes back 20, 30 years when we first started this area of research and reform. It was totally motivated by a feeling for what that young person was going through and the harm that was being done to them by traditional psychiatric care, and wanting that to be completely different, with hope and optimism and a belief in the young person's ability to be resilient and to recover even though they weren't well. Same with the families. The families obviously going through extremely worrying time, often overwhelming time with their teenage son or daughter becoming seriously ill with an illness that was stigmatised and misunderstood. And the families obviously needed huge support and information, and also involvement in the care of their son or daughter, because traditional services would often exclude them from that sort of involvement in a misguided sort of way. So young people and families are really at the heart of what we do. We respect them incredibly, and we value their input into and their advice in terms of what we need to do in research and also in the way we look after them.